Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a solo Q&A episode, so I have 3 questions I want to dive into. But first, before I dive into those, I just have a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you are sick of just focusing on weight loss and instead want a body recomp, then my one-on-one online coaching program is for you. I help you lose body fat and build muscle with my body recomp training, nutrition, and lifestyle methods. We look at things like your lifestyle and biofeedback to individualize your training and nutrition program to you and your specific needs. We also find that there's at least 1 to 2 bottlenecks outside of the training and nutrition protocol that are keeping you from seeing the results that you want to see. So we dive into that and get those figured out. If you aren't interested in full coaching, I do one-on-one consultations where we troubleshoot any issues you have and or map out a game plan. You can find both of these in the show notes. If you have any more questions on either one, you can reach out via Instagram or email or any other way that you can get a hold of me. Instagram is going to be the best, which I'll go over here in a minute, and we can continue that conversation. I also have a link to the application in the show notes as well, too. If you want to learn more about a body recomp and what it is, I have my 75-minute masterclass on body recomp, what it is, how to do it, and you can find the link to that in the show notes as well, too. Second, you can follow me on Instagram. So this is the easiest place to reach out to me if you have any questions. Jeff, HOEHN_. I do these Q&As on Monday, usually Thursday or Friday, where I answer questions. And then my favorite ones I'll do on here. So you can follow me there. And then lastly, if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find this podcast. And again, I appreciate everybody who listens to this podcast. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's question. So I actually had a couple questions around like rep ranges, like last week when it comes to muscle growth. So it was around so I'm going to combine a couple questions into one here. So like it was, what's better for muscle growth, high reps or lower reps? Also, hey, should I be doing higher reps or lower reps? What's the best rep range for muscle growth, or like, where should you be at? So I'm going to go over like my guide to rep ranges for muscle growth in a body recomp, right? Body recomp just being either short-term, hey, you're building muscle, losing body fat, or long-term where we're losing body fat and building muscle over time. So that's what I mean there by that. So I'm going to go over a few things and then give you some caveats to everything. So muscle growth, it's forgiving when it comes to how you program for it. Okay. So again, I'll get a lot of these questions a lot of times around, and I used to have the same questions too. Okay. What is the best rep range? And would think it was this like very like strict like rep range that you had to be in. It's usually around 8 to 12. And there is some merit to that, but we'll dive into all this so you understand it in a little bit more detail. But really it's, the rep range is a lot larger than that. Okay. So really can be anything from like 3 to 30 reps, and even like 1 to 2 reps can build muscle, but we'll come to find out that's probably not the most productive way to do it. And even this doesn't mean that 31 reps, all of a sudden it just cuts off. It's just as you get further and further away from that, it's like you're just not going to be in this like productive range. And again, we will talk about that, some things to consider there. What I'll say on this is that, so again, we have this large rep range that we can use. Now, the biggest things that you do need to focus on from this standpoint is you want to focus on getting stronger or doing more reps over time, right? So it's like, if you have a weight, if you can start to do that weight for more reps over time, or if you have a particular rep range you want to be in and you keep increasing weight in that rep range, it's, hey, you're getting stronger over time. That's a good sign. And then we want to make sure most of the time you're training relatively close to failure in whatever rep range you're in, right? 0 to 3 RAR, right? So 0 reps from fails. Hey, you couldn't do another rep. 1's, hey, you could maybe do 1 more. 3 is you could do 3 more. Most of the time we want to get close to failure. Now, again, it's not going to be perfect. And also certain rep ranges are going to lend themselves better to like certain RARs. As you get for like the higher the rep range is, you have to get closer to failure, but it's also tougher to gauge how close you are to failure. So there's some things that kind of intertwine here, but the biggest thing that you can think of to get close to failure is, okay, things are slowing down, and the biggest reason that's happening is from a muscular standpoint, not because you're like breathing too heavy or something. I think I talked about like why like the 12 to 20 rep range or higher is not great for muscle growth, which again, we'll dive into a little bit more today. But one of the reasons being is you do want to get pretty close to failure, but it just gets super tough to do that when you get to those higher rep ranges. So with that in mind, I'm going to go through a breakdown of each rep range. Okay. So these are, I said, if you can't see me, I have rep range in quotations because these are the rep ranges and the ranges I will typically program for clients. So like there's no magic to like me saying, hey, 6 to 10, 8 to 12. It's just, this is what I'll typically program for clients, and we'll go over the pros and cons of each one. Okay. So let's start with the 1 to 5 rep range. And then at the end here of this too, I'm going to give you a practical like number of what if you want to maximize muscle growth, kind of the amount of time you need to spend in each range. So let's first start with this 1 to 5 rep range. This is used minimally in my muscle growth programs. Okay. This is going to be better for like strength athletes. Again, even if you're a strength athlete, you probably don't want to be like your power lifter, or again, you're just really worried about lifting heavy number or lifting most numbers. It's like muscle growth's a little bit lower on the priority list. You're probably going to train in this rep range a little bit more because you need to lift those heavy weights to express that strength. Now you do need to build muscle. That's going to help you with strength. Therefore, that would be a reason somebody who's strength focused would get out of this 1 to 5 rep range from time to time. They don't only want to spend their time in here, but a strength athlete, a power lifter is going to spend a little bit more time in this 1 to 5 rep range, right? Like they just have to be able to lift heavy weight like that. If you're just trying to build muscle, you really don't need to spend much time in this rep range, unless you want to and you enjoy it, right? But then we have to consider the pros and cons of being in this rep range, which we will talk about here. But this is used minimally in my muscle growth programs, right? Maybe we'll hit 4 reps, 5 reps, but anything sub 4 reps, probably not happening. To me, the injury risk is high and you're just not going to get a lot out of it other than, hey, you can lift a pretty heavy weight, which is cool. And again, for some people, they enjoy that and they want to do that. So this is a conversation we need to have. And again, you're a power lifter, but if you're just trying to focus on body comp, trying to improve your look, you're trying to have the body recomp, less body fat, more muscle, you don't really need to work in this 1 to 5 rep range. The downside with this rep range for muscle growth is that it can be tough on the joints and other muscle groups when you start to do like higher volumes. Do 2 sets of 3 reps, it's like that volume there is just not really enough to stimulate muscle growth. You'll see a little bit of muscle growth, but for the amount of work you have to put in, it's like the SFR, basically the stimulus to fatigue ratio, how much stimulus you're getting from a muscle growth standpoint is very low, but the fatigue's pretty high that comes with it. And then again, if you want to you can get to the basically what you would do is you would just do more volume, right? You would do more sets. But the problem with this is as you start to do more and more sets, that's when you start to feel burnt out and your injury risk starts to increase there, right? So this is why this rep range isn't great for muscle growth, or why we don't want to spend the majority of our time here in this rep range. And like I said, the injury risk is a bit higher here because you're just lifting such heavy weight. And saying that, you could definitely fit this into a program if you enjoy it and if you just want to change up your training stimulus for a little bit of time, right? Hey, I've been lifting with higher rep ranges. It would be nice to get some 1 to 5 in. Okay, hey, let's throw some of that in just to switch things up a little bit. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say on this 1 to 5 rep range. Again, I used to make this mistake of like with my bench, I would train a lot in this 1 to 5 rep range just to see how heavy I could train. But really what that led to was like poor technique, not a lot of stimulus on my chest, and a lot of fatigue that came with it, right? So again, you could see where we're not getting enough volume that we need to build muscle, right? So that's the 1 to 5 rep range. And again, at the end, I'll tie this into like how much of your time you want to spend here. But these are some pros and cons to it. Again, in my programming, it's minimally used, again, maybe 4 to 5 reps. And this is going to be more geared towards strength athletes and people who are like power lifters. Then we have the 6 to 10 rep range. The good thing about this rep range is you can use a good amount of weight, but you can also get in a good amount of volume here, right? So this is where we start to get into this productive range for muscle growth, right? And the biggest thing is that you're able to use a good amount of weight if you're doing 6 to 10 reps, but you're also able to do a lot more volume with it. And that's where really that magic is with building muscle, right? We want to make sure we can do more volume and send that signal to build muscle. So that's one of and it's going to come with a lower injury risk, right? So again, you're going to be able to do that regularly over time. Yes, you're going to have to use a little less weight than you do in the 1 to 5, but we're not trying to just lift the most weight. We're trying to send the correct signal, the right stimulus to build muscle. So yes, your weight's going to be a little bit lower than it would be in the 1 to 5 rep range, but again, you're getting more volume, more tension on that muscle. And so I may bias a bit more like quote unquote compound exercises here in this rep range, but I'll use this rep range for all exercises and muscle groups, right? So what I mean by that is we're probably going to be using this for bigger muscle groups more often than not, quads, chest, back, stuff like that. Like you're going to see it less used in like delts and biceps and triceps. Still could use it, but again, a little bit less there with that. And we're probably not going to we might do a little bit with some curls and lateral raises, but you'll probably see more 8 to 12 rep range for those. And this is going to be more like you're just pressing movements, things like that we would use here. But it's definitely a common rep range that is assigned to clients for muscle growth. It's also great for people who are used to doing like higher rep sets and always quote unquote feeling the burn, getting their heart rate high. This would be a good rep range to use for them because again, they can add weight, but they're also getting in good volume as well too. So definitely good for that person. But this is definitely a very commonly assigned rep range. So next rep range that I have here that I'll assign for clients is 8 to 12. Again, another very common rep range. This is now you're looking at the 6. If you were to break this down and zoom out, we've gone over 6 to 10. Now we're about to go over 8 to 12. This is that kind of 6 to 12 rep range here where I think a lot of magic can happen with muscle growth. And again, the biggest reason that this is a good rep range for muscle growth is because it allows you to use a pretty decently heavy weight, but you, again, can continue to get in a good amount of training volume. Like you can do it multiple times. We can do it multiple times throughout the week, right? Where again, that 1 to 5 rep range, it's a little bit tougher to accumulate that volume. You have to do a lot of sets to make up for the lower amount of reps that you're doing. Again, this is that very common. And also on top of it, the injury risk is low, right? So again, you can continue to do more and more volume. It gives you the opportunity to do that. So this is why this is commonly prescribed in muscle growth programs and whatnot. There's a lot of good things that can happen in this 8 to 12 rep range for muscle growth. And so this rep range is used for literally all exercises and muscle groups at some point in a hypertrophy muscle building program. So yeah, 8 to 12 rep range, great. You're probably going to spend a lot of time there in it. Then we have like our 10 to 15 rep range. This rep range is assigned in most programs, but it's a little less frequently than the 6 to 10 or the 8 to 12, right? I like to say this for more like isolated exercises and certain like muscle groups like delts, biceps, triceps, stuff like that, versus we'll probably hit quads a little bit, but a little less with the quads, a little less with the chest, things like that. Or we'll also use this rep range if a certain muscle group has really only been in the 6 to 12 rep range for some time, right? So it's okay, maybe chest has really just been in that 6 to 12 rep range, again, combining the 6 to 10 and the 8 to 12. Now it's time to maybe we go 10 to 15, get a little bit more higher rep with it and whatnot. So you may do something like that. But for this, think more like delts, triceps, biceps, or things like machines and cables as the most common things programmed in this rep range. And again, some people just like training in this rep range a little bit more. So again, we're going to start to bias that a little bit more for that person. Now, in saying that, if somebody's been always training in the 10 to 15 rep range, very minimal in the 6 to 12, and they want to add muscle, you're probably going to start to see your shift a little bit to where we're at least going to throw in some 6 to 12 in there for you. Okay, so now we have the last rep range that's commonly assigned, and this is going to be that 15 to 20 plus rep range. And this one is used pretty sparingly. I used to do that. I used to use it a little bit more, but as I learned, as the last couple of years, I just have shied away from it a little bit more. I'm pretty sure I went over this recently in terms of this 15 to 20 rep range plus 15 to 20 plus rep range. And I just don't think it's the most productive. It can work, and there's certain situations where it may work better than others. I can go over that here. I'm just making sure I don't jump ahead of myself. But yeah, so again, this rep range is used sparingly. It can work. It may be applicable for certain muscle groups or exercises, same as the 10 to 15 rep range, or in the case where the client cannot tolerate a higher load. Times of injury, maybe you're a little bit older, like joints are starting to hurt. Hey, we might use this 15 to 20 plus rep range because it's a lower weight that you have to use and whatnot. Now it's still going to be challenging because you're going to have to push close to failure still. And that's going to provide a little bit of a different like feeling than going close to failure at 6 to 10. But yeah, and then also you could use like blood flow restriction training here in this rep range, things like that. So this rep range does come with some downsides for muscle growth, right? So much tougher to gauge intensity, AKA people stop the set further away from muscular failure. And again, it's just because it just is annoying, right? It's like just a lot of reps you have to do, it can get boring. And a lot of times the cardiovascular system ends up being the limiting factor over the target muscle, right? So it's like these higher rep ranges, you'll see like people stop the set because they're just like tired from breathing, right? Not necessarily because they're like biceps because their bicep is tired, right? So it's like, hey, isn't that a problem? Shouldn't I focus on that? And it's yeah, but that would be separate. We wouldn't want that to like, you would focus on improving your cardiovascular system outside of the weight training, right? I think people, they start to screw things up when they try to combine the two, and it's, oh, okay, I just need to lift lighter weights for longer and that's going to help my endurance. Yeah, it will help a little bit. You'll get better at like lifting your biceps or whatever muscle group in that rep range, but it's probably not the greatest from improving your cardiovascular system, right? So it's not great for muscle growth, not great for cardiovascular. So you need to separate these two versus trying to combine them into one and trying to get the best of both worlds in one. It's usually not going to happen. So again, this rep range is used, especially if a client likes it, preference, they're good at making sure they can get close to failure, and maybe they have some sort of injury or something like that would cause us to have to use this. All right, so the take home, that 6 to 15 rep range is a sweet spot for muscle growth and where you should spend most of your time, right? Like any hypertrophy program that spends more time outside of those rep ranges, have to look over it, right? I definitely give that, I don't know, man. Again, you can go outside of this rep range from time to time, but it should not make up a big chunk of your programming for the reasons I just mentioned. Some people enjoy certain rep ranges better, and that should not be ignored, right? As that will allow them to train harder and more efficiently. So if somebody does like a certain rep range, you do need to take that into consideration for yourself and if you program for clients, because if they like that best, they're going to be more likely to really push themselves and stay consistent with it, which ultimately is the most important for muscle growth. So how should training be divided up for muscle growth? So I split this up between 6 to 15, 15 to 30, 1 to 5, and then what your RIR should be. And basically what I have this as in that 6 to 15 rep range, 80 to 90% of your training should be in that 6 to 15 rep range, right? 0 to 10% should be in the 15 to 30 rep range at any one time, and 0 to 10% should be in the 1 to 5 rep range at any one time. I think once you start to go a little bit more than that in these 15 to 30 or 1 to 5 rep ranges, you're just probably not the most effective from a training standpoint, right? So you could do 10% at 15 to 30, 10% in the 1 to 5, and then 80% in the 6 to 15, or you can do 90% in the 6 to 15, 10% in the 1 to 5. If I was to work with a power lifter or a strength athlete, it would be, and they were going through like a hypertrophy block. This may change a little bit, maybe closer to 10 to 20% in the 1 to 5 rep range, and then 80 to 90% in the 6 to 15 rep range, but we probably would not touch that 15 to 30 rep range. That's just ends up being a little too far from where they need to go and whatnot. Hopefully that makes sense. And then 90 to 95% of your training should be at 0 to 3 RIR, right? If you do those three things, if you do those things, you get stronger over time. You're going to be in a good spot. You're going to build muscle. I will say some caveat to these numbers. That last thing that I gave in terms of the 6 to 15 rep range, injuries, right? If you're injured, this may alter the rep range. You may do more in the 15 to 30 or whatever feels good. Preference. If you enjoy one rep range over the other, you may alter this slightly, but veering too far away from this breakdown may impede results. But again, you know your body best and what it responds to and what is going to keep you consistent. And then training intensity, right? In the 1 to 5 rep range, you want to be careful with going to absolute failure more times than not. In the 15 to 30 rep range, it's more important to get close to muscular failure. So there are some things that change based on the rep range you work in, training intensity and whatnot, preference, injuries that I wanted to go over. So hopefully that was helpful on that question, a deep dive into that. So let's dive into the last couple questions. And so I had a question around my body recomp is doing great, but how to lose belly fat. So I would imagine this person's probably dropped a little bit of weight. They're looking a little bit leaner around their arms, extremities, things like that. Maybe they're building a little bit of muscle, they can tell, but they still aren't super happy with their midsection. So ultimately, this is going to come down to just dropping more body fat. Unfortunately, when you drop weight, for one, like you're going to do to be as lean as they want to be. So there's that, right? So it's like you lose 10 pounds. How come I don't have like abs or I'm not leaner in my midsection? We got to think your body's not going to be like, oh, hey, so-and-so wants to lose belly fat. So we're going to preferentiate losing belly fat there, or that's where we're going to lose fat and take it first. No, unfortunately, it's just up to your genetics. So you got to think it's taking all that off of the entire body. Now that 10 pounds also, if you're not weight training, could potentially be muscle as well too, which isn't going to help with belly fat. So unfortunately, if there's a particular area that you want to lean out, you just are going to have to keep losing more body fats. For example, my first couple bodybuilding shows, I felt super lean. I was like, man, I got to be there. And I still probably had 5 to 10 pounds to go. So it just, unfortunately, you just probably need to lose a little bit more than you think. And you just need to keep losing more body fat. And unfortunately, you got to remember your body's going to take it throughout. You're just going to take that body fat off throughout the entire body, not just one particular area. Now, certain areas might be a little bit more responsive to it and whatnot. One thing I will say on this though, is definitely look at like stress management and sleep, right? I do think that if stress is high and whatnot, and you're getting poor sleep, I do think that you could potentially have this, like your body may preference might be a little bit more stubborn in the midsection there if this is the case, right? Definitely look at managing stress and making sure you have good stress management techniques. You're not always just wired and go and just always thinking about the next thing you need to do, high anxiety. If that's the case, I do think you would benefit a little. Like you still are going to have to continue to lose more body fat if you are not seeing the leanness that you want there. But I do think working on those things could help a little bit. Again, this isn't to say, oh, you manage your stress, you get more sleep, you don't have to lose any more body fat, you'll all of a sudden have ripped abs and be leaner in your midsection. No, that's not the case, but I do think that will help a little bit. But again, it's ultimately going to come down to losing more body fat over time. And sometimes this is where like this kind of phasic approach, it ends up being like, hey, you get lean, but there's still certain, like you've lost a lot of weight. Man, how do I keep going? you feel like you're just like, I don't know where to go from here. I still need to lose more weight. It's going to be tougher to keep going. This is where you need to start to incorporate that phasic approach, right? My body recomp talks about that. We have the short-term approach, then we have this long-term approach, where when you get to the long-term body recomp approach, you do have to go through these phases of muscle gain and fat loss. You can't do both at the same time. You have to start to prioritize and have periods of time where you do one or the other, and it ends up you end up dropping body fat in certain periods, but not like all the time. Again, this ultimately is where it comes down to. You're going to have to lose more body fat, and it's just going to take longer than you think to get there. Not great news, but again, at the end of the day, my thought on it is, if you're just trying to get to the end goal, that's probably not going to, is this going to last anyways? And I feel like with it taking longer, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, because you're going to have to do this. If you want to maintain it and continue to see, if you want to maintain a look, or you get to look and then maintain it, like, you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to stay into fitness and whatnot, and like working out and eating, again, not like restrictively, but you're going to have some sort of moderation around your food. You're going to have to do that anyways. So you might as well just have a reason to keep going then at that point, versus being like, okay, I'm going to get to this end goal and then everything's going to be great, and then I can just do anything I want at that point. That's not going to happen, right? If you do, that's where you see people, they lose weight and then they gain it back because they want to get to this goal weight. They get there and then it's like, all right, now I can just do whatever I want. And unfortunately, if you don't use it, you lose it. A funny quote that I feel like just makes a ton of sense in fitness, and I feel like I have to use that daily. So something to think about there. Hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions on that. And yeah, let's go to the next question. Advice for people torn between wanting to build muscle. This kind of goes hand in hand with what we just talked about. They're torn between wanting to build muscle, but need a little fat to lose, but feel weight is low enough and don't want to look too skinny. So this is like your, like, I feel like skinny fat-ish type person, right? It's like you don't have a lot of fat to lose, but you want to build muscle, but your weight's low enough. So what do you do here? So what I would do in this situation is, so again, think of this as like the skinny fat avatar. It's like, hey, I have to gain a ton of weight to build muscle, but I don't really want to gain a ton of body fat to do that. So this is what I would do. I'd get your protein to around 1 gram per pound of body weight. That's the first thing we would do. Make sure you're in a good spot protein wise, get that dialed in. We'd get you on a good muscle building program, right? So you're going to be focused on training that is there to build muscle, right? We're not trying to improve your cardiovascular and your weight training. We're not trying to burn the most calories. We're not trying to lose body fat in our training. We're there to build muscle. And so it needs to be specific to that, not trying to combine a ton of different things into one training, right? It's not going to work that way. You could put your calories at maintenance or a small deficit for this. For most people, we'd probably start you at your maintenance calories just to get an idea. Then we could always lower it down just a little bit, right? But calories would be put at your maintenance. So then that way it's, hey, you're not going to see your weight really trend up a ton. Again, you're going to have to see some weight gain if you are adding some muscle. So don't expect like maintenance calories to mean that your weight's going to stay the exact same. You might see it come up just a little bit. Again, we're not going to have you gain 30 pounds of fat, but you might have to step away from seeing that scale weight trend down. So put your calories at maintenance. Again, this is going to provide enough energy for you to really push your training, but you're also not going to add body fat at that point. Plus, if you're newer to training, you haven't really had any of this stuff dialed in, you have a little bit of recomp in you where you could build a little bit of muscle and maybe lose some body fat at the same time. At maintenance, probably not going to happen. You might have to be in a small deficit if you want to see that. So again, but I would put you at maintenance calories to start, and then potentially a deficit for a small recomp effect. And make sure you prioritize sleep, right? Make sure you're getting good sleep. That's going to help you recover. That's going to help tell your body to build muscle, maintain what you have, and it just help you. It's going to help you also stick to your maintenance calories too. That's what I would do here. This is, again, that skinny fat person. So again, it's very similar to the body recomp approach. Again, this is where I want to direct you to the body recomp webinar that I did a couple months ago. This will give you a ton of information into it in terms of what you need to do there with that. So let me know if you have any questions on this. Hopefully this was helpful. Those are the 3 questions for this week, and I will talk to you guys next time.